fireworks begin?
Madam Clerk, you ready?
I've never been in a conference ever.
The Committee on Regulatory Reform will now come to order. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Chair Carter,
Present.
Representatives Liberati,
Present.
Neely. Here. Scott,
Present.
Young,
Here.
Grant,
Present.
McFall,
Here.
Snyder,
Here.
Wilson,
Here.
Mueller,
Here.
Filler, Wenzel,
Here.
Aragona,
Here.
Beerline,
Here.
Nyer.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 14 members present. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Rep. Neely moves to adopt the minutes from our April 11th, 2023 meeting. Seeing no objections, the minutes are adopted. Good morning, everyone. Today we'll hear testimony on House Bills 4526 through 4528, including the one that I sponsored, House Bill 4527. I'm giving brief comments from here, and then we'll ask the Michigan aggregates to come forward to give testimony with others following. I do want to thank the members and stakeholders for taking time to come and discuss this important package, which is needed to lower the cost of road construction projects and save taxpayer dollars. This package is very much aligned with the commitment of the governor to fix our state's crumbling roads and infrastructure. I believe aggregate permitting reform is a huge part of our overall commitment to improving infrastructure. As you will hear today, the need for aggregate reform in Michigan is fundamental and critical. Crumbling roads and driving record demand for limited permitted aggregate sites. Also, rising costs of road construction require immediate action to ensure we are making taxpayer dollars stretch as far as possible. Again, I thank everyone for coming this morning and look forward to hearing everybody's comments. We have a hard stop at 12, so we will be timing because I want to be fair to everybody, those for, those opposed, and anybody anywhere in the middle. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Doug Needham from the Michigan Aggregates Association.
All right. Good morning, Chairman Carter and members of the committee. I am Doug Needham, the Executive Director of the Michigan Aggregates Association, and it is a pleasure to be here before you today to talk about the current crisis that is facing the aggregate industry and what we believe the solution is to address it. We are grateful for Representative Witwer, Representative Carter, and Representative Outman for their support of these bills and are hopeful you will support as well. A little bit about our industry. The aggregate industry employs highly skilled women and men who produce and deliver the essential raw materials, stone, sand, gravel, and slag that's used to build roads, bridges, public works, and private construction. Today, I'm not only here on behalf of our members, but also on behalf of our Build It Michigan Strong coalition, a coalition that is comprised of a diverse group including labor unions, business leaders, and construction companies, all of which support the need to improve access to aggregate and House Bills 4526, 4527, and 4528. And why we're in need of these bills is because Michigan's crumbling infrastructure and strong economy is driving up demand for a limited amount of permitted aggregate. The statewide supply shortage is due to local units of governments effectively blocking the opening of new mines. And they're doing this by using the very serious consequences language spelled out in Public Act 113 of 2011. When very serious consequences language was developed, it was an honest attempt to give communities a standard to deny a permit if the mine would cause serious consequences. However, townships are denying based on the mere fact that a few more trucks would be on the road. Unfortunately, local opposition is so intense that everything is now considered to be very serious consequences. This was not what was originally intended. As a result, they urge companies to go somewhere else to mine. It's very common for us to hear some version of, we understand we need the material, just don't mine it here, go somewhere else. Unfortunately, we must mine the material where it's located, and this normally doesn't fit neatly into zoning processes. Sure, they can zone where 7-Eleven would be located or the size of a business sign, but we must mine where Mother Nature deposited the aggregate. Aggregate mining is one of the few extractive industries that must obtain a permit from one of the 1,240 townships. This has caused significant problems that other extractive industries do not experience due to the lack of industry knowledge at the local level, as well as major inconsistencies in regulations from township to township. Furthermore, local officials do not have the insight into the importance of the material to state and federal construction projects. The supply chain is broken. Simple economic state, when there's a high demand for product that's in short supply, prices increase. However, the bigger cost is due to trucking. Fewer operations take place. That means the material is further from the job site. The bottom line is that both taxpayers and the private sector pay more for the material, and we ultimately get fewer miles repaved and fewer bridges rebuilt. The community resistance has grown stronger as more people move into rural areas and through the use of social media and other anti-mining tactics. Now, this is just a snapshot of various townships across the state that have presented roadblocks. I show this to help convey the message that the problem is not located just in one intersection in one township. It truly is statewide. And permit denials and delays take many paths. For instance, on occasion, companies work for months to prepare and submit an application, only to be informed that the township placed a moratorium on mining while they revise their mining ordinance. In many cases, this process takes months, if not years. And during this revision, new and unnecessary steps are added to the process. One of the latest is require the applicant to demonstrate need, market need. Townships dismiss the needs of company needs, and they make it on their own to determine truly what a market need would be. So they are appointing themselves as experts in this area and ignoring the statewide demands of construction-grade sand and gravel. And to top it off, they are requiring the mining company to create an escrow account with the township so they can pay for well-known and effective trial lawyers to help stop the mine. We as an industry are footing the bill for townships to fight us. I stress we're currently wasting taxpayers' dollars on transportation costs, and in many areas and for many construction projects, we are forced to deliver material from distances that are further away. This added distance increases cost and diminishes the effectiveness of our taxpayers' dollars. The impacts to projects by increasing the haul route from 30 miles to 60 miles has drastic effects on our ability to fix our roads and bridges. And in many cases, we are transporting sand and gravel in excess of 100 miles. A couple years ago, Governor Whitmer began selling bonds to fix our roads. According to MDOT, these dollars will rebuild 1,370 miles of major roadway throughout the state. If we have to continue to haul materials long distances, we will diminish the effectiveness of these bonded dollars. Now, this example here assumes that all new aggregate material is required for the project, and we know that's not always the case, but it does show that if we recycle 50% or even 75% of the road in the rebuild, we are still wasting millions in added transportation cost. So with that stated, the crisis our industry is facing is real, and there is a solution. House Bill 4526, 4527, and 4528. These bills will develop one consistent statewide standard and will place the sand and gravel industry in the same permitting process as many other extractive industries. They will ensure public hearings. They will ensure environmental oversight. They will add reclamation requirements. They will protect personal property rights and hopefully allow for costly litigation to be avoided. They will also allow us to stop wasting tax dollars on longer haul routes so we can fix more infrastructure. Again, I want to stress we're not looking to reinvent the wheel. We are just looking to be aligned with many other extractive industries in our state. While some have concerns that this opens the door to loss of local control for other things like solar, wind, or vacation rentals. I can't emphasize enough that this specifically addresses just sand and gravel. All they do is seek to treat sand and gravel just like other extractive industries like oil, gas, and nickel, as it always should have been. One of the benefits of this solution is that local units of government and community members have the ability to express concerns during the permit process. Eagle will be required to notify the local unit of government when an application is submitted and empowers Eagle to hold public hearings. The application process will not be in a vacuum. It will be open and transparent for all locals to have input. The solution will also ensure the protection of the quality of life by defining sound and vibration limitations, dust control, truck loading hours and hours of operation, setback requirements, berming and screening requirements, stockpile heights, and haul routes. This bill requires a mine operator to collaborate with the local county road commission if the mining operation does not have direct access to a Class A truck route. And it will also add post-mining reclamation requirements. Now, this QR code on this slide will link you to a number of fantastic reclamation projects and demonstrate how sand and gravel operations have been transformed into vital parts of community as either back to farmland, parks, lakes, or subdivisions. This solution will also continue to protect the environment. All of the current permitting requirements are still required. The bill will also improve the environment by lowering carbon emissions that are emitted due to the longer haul distances that currently exist. If we are able to open mines closer to the markets, we will significantly reduce carbon emissions. Now, during testimony on these bills, you might hear from our opponents that there is no need for aggregate because we are exporting construction-grade sand and gravel to neighboring states. This is not true. You might also hear that we will negatively impact communities by causing silicosis. This is not true. You might also hear how we will pollute water. Again, not true. You might hear how a sand and gravel operation can be opened in your developed urban subdivision. Not true. We are grateful for the support that we have received on these packages of bills, including support from the governor, members of the legislature, and our entire Build It Michigan Strong coalition. Again, thank you for listening, and on behalf of our coalition, we urge you to support House Bills 4526, 4527, and 4528. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Needham. You just you beat the clock there. So with that, we have time for a question. Rep. Mueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you. Just curious, I know this is kind of a hot button issue, right? So if you wanted to come to agreement, would you still consider these packages if there was an exemption for the Metamora area?
No, we are not for exemptions.
No exemption.
No.
So what you have is what you want, right?
Where we're at is we believe putting it in the hands of Eagle, the experts at Eagle, to make the determination whether a mine should be opened in a community or not is where the decision should be laid.
Okay, and we've worked on these for quite a few years, right? So you're trying to get something done, so there has to be compromise, correct?
We have
And
compromised
you think you've reached it all the
significantly.
way? You think you've went as far as you could go?
We have made significant compromises throughout the life of the bills as these have been worked on. We have sat down with parties across our opposition, and we have listened to the concerns. We have added environmental protections. We have added additional time for comments. We have made sure that haul routes are collaborated with the local road commissions. So we have made considerable compromises throughout the life of this bill.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Rep. Aragona.
Yeah, thank you for being here. It's something you touched on, and I guess I was hoping you could just expand on it a little bit. Obviously, I have a local background, so some of the concerns that I know I've heard and that I would have are things such as dust control, noise pollution, but especially groundwater. What is the effect of these? I don't have any in my district, I'm sorry, so I'm still learning a little bit, but what is the effect on groundwater and any chemicals that might be leaching in? If the environment is affected, or if there is an issue with some of these other things such as dust and noise, what are the remedies? How do we remedy that if a new mine goes in, or even how your members do for current mines? How do we help the people who are living in that community?
So, first of all, not every mining operation utilizes water. That's if we're going to be washing the product in order to process it to its end use, which would be used directly into the pavements for road construction. But if we are going to be using water, what happens is we do create a series of settling ponds that we will pump groundwater to fill the ponds initially, and then we recycle that water. So we are truly just using clear water to wash out the sand or the sediment, the clays, the silts. We are not adding chemicals to the water, and we are recycling that water throughout the process. So at the end of the third settling pond, the water is clean enough for us to put back through the plant. MDOT does not want contaminated water or contaminated material coming to their site. We are not mining contaminated material. We are not processing with any chemicals that would contaminate it. We are truly just washing the silt and the clays out of the sand and gravel with water and recirculating it as much as possible.
Okay, thank you. And then can you just also touch on, again, I don't live by one of these, so some of the concerns I've heard are noise, obviously, large machinery noise in an area that is next to residential. So can you at least speak to that a little bit, as well as, I would assume, digging stuff out of the earth, you're going to create a lot of dust. What does that look like, either for a new operation or current? How do we mitigate that for residents?
Okay, so dust control, I'll touch on that. We do actually have to get a permit from Eagle in order to process material. So there is an air permit that is required. We are not allowed to have fugitive dust leave the site. So our operations are required to use sprays in order to keep the dust down, as well as to spray the road with water, the internal haul routes. So Eagle does require us to have a permit. They come out and they do inspect sites. But also, above and beyond that, MSHA, the Mine Safety and Health Administration, also requires us to keep dust down for the workers. So MSHA will put dust monitors on workers periodically just to make sure that they are not exposed to any levels that would be a detriment to their health. So we feel dust is held at the environment protected, as well as at the individual worker level. And then as far as the other one was noise. So when we went through and set the noise limitations that's put in this bill, we reviewed a number of permits that have been granted by various townships across the state. And so what we did is we looked at the limits that were currently imposed on our industry, and we put those in the bill. So they were ones that were already existing that we just said, let's be consistent. Let's make sure that at least not all of them had noise limitations. So we wanted to make sure at least everyone was going to be held to a standard that was not going to be a detriment to the communities.
Representative Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Doug, for your presentation. You briefly touched on it in your presentation that about that we're not an exporter of aggregate material. This is something that keeps coming up by opponents of the legislation in front of us, saying that we're a net exporter of aggregate material. Can you expand upon that briefly, please?
Yes. So in our state, we have some very fantastic, high-quality limestone deposits, specifically more in the northern part of our lower peninsula, as well as along the shoreline of our upper peninsula. And that is a nice chemical grade quality limestone that is used in the steel making. It is used in the power industry for scrubbing smokestacks and stuff, and it's also used in the pharmaceutical industry. That is the limestone that we are exporting to other states and other markets that need it. It is not construction grade. It is way higher than that because these other industries are in strong demand of that. So that is when we read about, well, we're exporting material, it is the limestone. Construction grade sand and gravel, we are not exporting. In fact, we're trying to bring it in. Some of our companies are bringing in from neighboring states if the rail lines are able to accommodate that. And we're also bringing in some of the other high quality, strong, durable stone from Canada because we don't have all of the characteristics plentiful in our state that we need.
Thank you.
Representative Filler.
Thank you. Last time I worked on this issue, there was a lot of discussion about Class A haul routes. Class A, I believe, not grade A, Class A. And I just saw a lot of confusion in communities about what happens with a Class A haul route and what is allowed on that route, and confusion even among people who live on Class A. Mm-hmm. So maybe you could just kind of clarify or give some background about how that impacts your business, or maybe how this bill would impact that.
So Class A haul routes are local roads and it could be state roads, but they were built with federal dollars to haul commerce throughout the state. So they were built with the full intention of hauling the freight that goes from the farm to the market, from the industry to the grocery store. But that is what a Class A haul route, it was designed, built, paid for with the intentions of hauling freight on that road. And that's why we said, fine, we will make sure that if our facility does not abut and come right out onto a Class A haul route, that we will work with the local road commission to make sure that we aren't going to have a detriment to that community into the haul routes throughout there. So, but the roads that we are trying to get to, those get us to the market the fastest, the quickest, the most efficient way are the Class A haul routes that were designed for our trucks. And that is why it is in our best interest to put a sand and gravel operation as close to one of those as possible.
Representative Beerline.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your testimony this morning. Can you tell me roughly how many mines have been denied in the last 5 years by a local unit of government?
It's a tough question because, as I've said, denial comes in many forms. There are a number of producers right now that are still in the process because they've had to do one more study upon one more study upon one more study. Some have simply just given up. They said the amount of hoops that they've had to continue to go through just hasn't made it worth its while to continue to operate. There has been a handful of them that are in lawsuits right now that attorneys are involved with trying to navigate through the courts. I think you're going to hear one of them this afternoon or this morning. So to have a book that says how many have been approved, how many have been denied, we don't have a number on that. If we went to Eagle, we certainly would know, and I could tell you the number because there would be a central repository for it, but we don't have that information.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Nyer.
Thank you, Chair. This goes into the zoning issue there. If a township or county has a current master plan, are you going to help to follow that, or how is your site selection based upon there if they have a current master plan that recognizes where mining operations can be ran?
For the time frame that we would be needing to mine the material, the master zoning plan would be null and void under this. However, when we're done mining, the land has to be reclaimed back to whatever category it was listed in the master zoning plan. So the problem is the material is where it is, and we can only mine it where Mother Nature placed it. So for the time that it is vital for the state needs, we need to get in there and be able to process that product. But when the land is reclaimed back to the community, then that mining operator, the developer, is going to have to follow whatever master zoning plan the township has laid out.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for your testimony today. Does the legislation require financial assurance?
Yes.
It does.
Yes,
Okay.
and that's been one of the things is we want to make sure, I want to say it's the sins of the past, but way back when we would go in and we would mine the product, we'd find, oh, this is the sweet spot, the honey hole. It's got the nice stones that we need. And they would mine that product for that job site nearby, and then they would leave it. And that would leave it in a spot of disarray. A lot of times we're trying to go back now. We have better mining techniques that we can try to use lab. But what this bill requires is that there is a financial assurance that when the project is done, reclamation will be required, or it will be done. Okay. So if the mining company goes under, there's a fee per acre that is going to be put on that the mining operator is going to have. Now, as far as reclamation goes, though, we do reclaim as we mine. And that is one of the processes that we found is beneficial for a lot of things. It's a good business decision because as we're not just done, we don't have a mass amount of land that we can't put the cost of reclamation back into. But we do reclaim as we go. We believe it's beneficial for the environment that we do this, as well as it's just good for the life of the mine as it's done. So, okay. But we do have that, yes.
You do, and how much is that about?
Right now, it's up to $8,000 an acre is what the bill says, and we feel that's excessive for putting land back to a slope in a usable condition. It's not the development part. This is truly just the reshaping of the land, but we did agree to go up to $8,000.
And is that enough?
I think that's plenty, and yes.
Just wondering. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Representative McFall.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here today and your testimony. I appreciate it. You had mentioned that if there was not a Class A road or route that you would work with the locals. Is that in the bill?
Yes.
That you have to work with the locals? Okay, because
Yes.
I don't remember seeing it.
Yep.
So if somebody could point that
Yep,
out to me,
it's
that'd
in
be
the
great.
bill.
But okay, I just wanted to make sure because sometimes we make promises,
Right.
and then the legislation goes through, and that wasn't part of it.
No,
So,
it is.
okay.
It is specifically in there.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Needham. Next, we're going to have Matt Doble from the Michigan Aggregate Association,
Thanks.
wishing to speak in support.
Okay, did you have the other presentation or no?
No, just me.
Okay.
We need to turn that on. It's on? Good morning. My name is Matt Double, and I'm here representing USA Earthworks and North Star Aggregates. If you look up USA Earthworks, you'll find we're a commercial excavating company out of Plainwell, Michigan, employing 32 to 35 people. We're a MDOT DBE certified contractor, doing a lot of milling, trucking. I also represent North Star Aggregates. If you look up North Star Aggregates, you'll find nothing, because we are in the middle of a 3-year battle with Watson Township all the way to the Supreme Court, Court of Appeals, for an already pre-existing gravel mine that they will not allow me to mine. We are half-mile off the highway. We are on Class A haul roads. It was, like you said, ma'am, in regards to, something left behind. This was a pit that was left behind that we want to go in and finish, do it correct, and then it will be back to the master plan, which is residential. No matter what we do, no matter what we say, we did every single report and study that was not even required by their legislation, by their ordinances, by their anything. We did them anyway. We presented them to them. Because we did them, they weren't, no. So we need to do them, okay? Then they tried to make me pay for them, found out they could not do that. Then 2 months later, they wanted to do them, found out they were $65,000 to do this. They couldn't afford all this. I had already paid for all this. This is over approximately 16 months of planning commission meetings every single month with something new that came up every single month. And every single month, we would handle what they needed, give them what they needed, and then it would be something else. And then as soon as they got that, it would be something else. Our location is not going into the water. We're staying 4 feet above the water. Our location is ideal for everything when it comes to trucks. When it comes to the location, we are right in the middle of Grand Rapids and Kalamazoo. A huge needed area, not only for my company, but for everybody in the area. And there we sit. Now we're waiting for a court date. We're almost $400,000 in, and we're not a big company. We're fronting this all ourselves because we're this far. We're not stopping. We've paid the money. We've done everything we're supposed to do, and here we sit. Voted down 6-0. Members of the board on video stated, yes, he meets all the criteria. Yes, he's done everything he is supposed to do. But we just can't do this to our township members. There we sit. So now, there we wait. So here's the other side of the spectrum. Watson Township and Martin Township are divided by US 131. I live in Martin Township, have my whole life. I'm on the planning commission in Martin. In Martin Township, you can show up with a 1-page site plan, be voted through and open in 1 month, 1 meeting. Problem is, the material isn't there. The material is across the highway in Watson Township. Watson Township is a prevalent gravel township. Will not allow me to do it. It's just the fact of the differences from one township to the other. It's not based on actual fact. It's not based on the ordinance. It's based on emotion because they don't want it. Can't you find a different location? All of our township board members will have to drive by that location. All of our township members will have to drive by that location. It's where the material is. And you're going to go in and finish what somebody else left. Not allowed to. And we're literally 3 years into it. So.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Lance Benonimi from the from MITA. I won't butcher that one.
You said you weren't going to try, Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Lance Benonimi, Vice President of Government Affairs for the Michigan Infrastructure and Transportation Association, more commonly known as MITA. MITA represents over 500 companies within our state that build our roads, bridges, underground water and sewers, specialty infrastructure projects, dams, you name it. We're here in support of these bills for one simple reason. They will, if passed, they will lower infrastructure construction costs in Michigan and allow taxpayer dollars to be stretched further. Infrastructure construction costs have increased in some areas by over 20% since the beginning of the pandemic. Trucking and transportation costs have been one of the highest increases over the past several years. Longer haul routes will mean higher costs and increased air pollution. By opening up more aggregate mining closer to construction sites, the state will save millions of dollars every year. The latest reports show that we need $3.9 billion more annually in our infrastructure for just roads and bridges. That number was $2.2 billion back in 2016. That's increased to 3.9 in just 7 years. The longer we continue to underinvest and restrict cost-saving measures that these bills are attempting to fix, the amount needed will increase each year. Recently, the Transportation Asset Management Council have released their annual report, and for the 16th straight year, we have a higher percentage of poor roads in our state than we do for good roads in our state. In addition, the American Society of Civil Engineers yesterday released their report card on infrastructure, and we received a C-, a grade that no Michigan should accept. It is no secret that our infrastructure in Michigan is failing. Prices continue to increase, and MITA strongly believes that these bills are the only way in which policymakers can combat inflation foreign construction costs. I'd like to thank Representative Whitwer, you, Mr. Chairman, and Representative Altman for introducing these bills, and I would be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
No questions? Thank you. Next, we have Kelly, might be your handwriting, Kuiper from Great Lakes Excavating. Okay.
My name is Kelly Kuiper. I currently serve as the Director of Development for Great Lakes Excavating Service, a land development, excavating, and mining company based out of Ottawa County. I'm also currently a planning commissioner and a mining board member for my local township. In my past, I was an Ottawa County commissioner, a township trustee, and a zoning board of appeals member. In college, while most of my friends were interning in New York City and Chicago, I worked to get a dog park approved in the city of Hastings. I started a community garden in Vermontville with the Barry County 4-H, and I assisted with brownfield redevelopment in the city of Grand Rapids. My dedication to and passion for local government is evident. I started my professional career as an assistant zoning administrator for a local unit of government and quickly became attuned to the critical nature of zoning ordinances. The idea that a 200-page document is entirely responsible for determining property rights for often the single greatest asset in an individual's or family's financial portfolio is incredible. This new lens that I adopted of viewing zoning ordinances as the gatekeeper to understanding not only the highest and best use of a piece of property, but also potentially the highest and best value of land as an asset has served me well while I took my career to the private sector, especially as it relates to mining and other contentious land uses. Simply put, a zoning ordinance should be a guide for what someone can or cannot do with their property and should provide regulations such as setbacks, etc., that must be followed to gain approval. If a site plan can meet the list of criteria set forth in that document, it stands to reason that the approval should be granted. Yes? However, contentious land uses bring about a set of challenges that are not founded in meeting the litmus test of which the ordinance should act. Rather, emotionally charged meetings in small rooms packed with 50 to 100 people turn the tables. This is a devastating challenge for an often inexperienced group of volunteers that serves as local planning commissioners. And worse is that many zoning officials are equally as inexperienced since they gained their position by default after only winning their township supervisor election. I have been spit on at planning commission meetings, called foul names, sworn at. I've required a sheriff escort to my car after meetings multiple times. And yet, I'm not frustrated by the angry neighbors. That's human nature. I can understand why they would be upset about a contentious land use coming next to their house. I get that. I'm frustrated by the planning commissioners who are unable to grant me, as the applicant, fair and impartial due process because they feel more beholden to calming the angry residents or not upsetting their neighbors or members of their church than they do beholden to the set of land use laws which govern their municipality. For example, I spent over 3 hours answering rapid-fire questions by residents at a planning commission meeting a month ago. The chairman of the planning commission did not conduct the public hearing. I conducted it by calling on members of the audience, while the entire planning commission and township attorney let this circus happen. But again, that's not the frustrating part. What is frustrating is that after I gave my presentation and shared with everybody our lengthy hydrological studies, soil borings, details on sample wells that we installed, engineered plans, I answered only one question by planning commissioners. They did not conduct any discussion as a board. Following the chairman asking any questions and they all saying no, the township attorney stood up, produced a formal resolution for a motion to table that was clearly prepared prior to the meeting and prior to hearing my presentation or any discussion at that meeting. And that formal resolution contained 14 additional documents and reports that the Planning Commission is requiring for me to come off the table. These reports exceed the authority of the zoning ordinance and in some cases are just simply improper to how things work. It would not make sense for me to seek a construction level permit from the Road Commission prior to knowing that my land use is entitled. But unfortunately, this experience is not isolated to one municipality and it's not isolated to my company. All that being said, I care deeply about my community and the local unit of government and take very seriously the rights and the land use laws of the communities in which I work. Therefore, I don't make this statement lightly. When the local unit of government cannot impartially and effectively administer their zoning ordinances to all applicants, even for the most contentious uses, they are no longer fulfilling their obligations and duties as commissioners and as township staff members. Therefore, in order for mining applicants to receive fair due process of their application, there must be consistency in ordinances, consistency in the review process, and consistency in implementation of mines throughout the state. And it's my opinion that this will only be accomplished if the mining entitlement process is moved under the jurisdiction of Eagle. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Travis Boskool from Eagle, having no position but wishing to speak.
Morning, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the opportunity to be here in front of the committee today. As the chairman said, I'm Travis Boskool. I'm a deputy director with the Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy. With me is Adam Wygant. He's the division director of our Oil, Gas, and Minerals Division, which regulates various types of mining all around the state. So again, appreciate the opportunity to be here. As the chairman indicated, Eagle's here. We're not taking a position on the bills the committee's considering this morning. But we did want to offer a few thoughts and be here to address questions that committee members might have. I've heard the name Eagle talked about a lot already, and I'm sure we'll hear it a whole bunch more times in this hearing. So that's why we're here. So as we've been reviewing this legislation for quite a while and working with stakeholders on it, our focus has been to ensure that any potential state permitting program for aggregate mining operations is one that's structured in a way that can be administered effectively while also being protective of public health, safety, and the environment. And just this week, yesterday, we transmitted a number of comments and suggested changes to the sponsor's office, trying to address those types of issues. Those suggestions run a pretty large gamut from small and really technical things like how the contested case process might work to those with a larger impact, and including trying to shave some edges off areas that might be ripe for conflict with local residents. Those include trying to address issues around permit applications from already existing mines, groundwater monitoring, habitat conservation as part of restoration, potential nuisance conditions, permit application steps, whether or not the proposed surveillance fee is sufficient to support the new regulatory program, financial assurance, and more. So we're looking forward to discussions regarding the inclusion of those important amendments as these bills move forward, and appreciate the chance to have some constructive conversations there. But that being said, I just want to make it perfectly clear here that Eagle's not making a recommendation to the legislature on the issue of local control over siting, permitting, operation, and mining operations. So with that, we're happy to take questions. Adam's here to help me. Curious what the committee would like to know more about.
Thank you. Representative Bierlein.
Thank you. Sorry. How many active mining permits does Eagle currently oversee in the state?
Right now, we have about 6 active sand dune mining permits and 2 ferrous mineral mines. Those are our iron mines in UP. One of them is idle, and we have 2 properties that we oversee for non-ferrous metallic minerals, which is Eagle Mine in the Upper Peninsula, nation's only primary nickel mine, and copper.
Do you have any estimates as to how many new mines this would put under your purview, by any chance?
The only real idea we have from that a little bit is coming from Aggregates Society or Aggregates Association that indicates that we may see in the neighborhood of 4 to 10 new mines a year, 4 to 6.
And one thing I'll add there, Representative, you heard me mention potential influx of currently existing mines. One of the provisions in the bill allows currently authorized and operating mines to apply to our permitting program, right? So we have an idea of what new mines might come in from conversations with aggregates, but we don't really have a good sense of, are there mines out there that are already operating that would choose to say, you know, I'd rather be permitted by the state than here locally. So that's also one of the comments I mentioned about the surveillance fee. It's hard to get a sense of how many tons might start coming in and how much revenue that might produce to generate a regulatory program.
Okay, thank you. And if I can, Mr. Chair, one more question. In the bill, it looks like there's a 14-day determination for you to decide if the bill, the application package is complete. Is that in line with other Eagle permitting applications statewide?
It is for a determination of administrative completeness, that basically all the pieces and components that are required for a complete application are present. It doesn't necessarily mean that we've made a full evaluation of the adequacy of the content and so forth. That obviously takes a little bit more time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Representative Argona.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for being here, guys. Obviously, if we have this type of program, I'm assuming you guys have taken a look at what the cost would be on state government. Do you have an estimate on what the cost would be, ballpark, as well as how many FTEs this would take?
So I'll take a first stab at that. And, you know, I don't think you're going to get the most satisfying answer that you'll get today to one of your questions. So I'll start with the easy part.
That's honest. I like that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Honest to a fault sometimes. To begin, right? So we're gonna have a program. We're gonna have applications coming in, but there's gonna be no surveillance fee until these mines start producing aggregate material for market. If a permitting program does come to the state. So to begin, we think it's 4 people, right? We need some an administrative staff. We need some folks who'd be able to go out on the road, take a look at these sites, process that application, and a supervisor. The indeterminate answer is how many mines do you end up with, right? Because the answer of how many staff it takes is completely dependent on how many mines we have. I think we recognize that given the nature of these types of operations, we're going to need to have people located throughout the state in our district offices to be able to respond to complaints, do inspections, concerns. So that really just scales with the number of mines that'll be. And I think that's part of the reason that a surveillance fee that's appropriate is really important, because as revenue goes up, we can come back to the legislature and say, hey, we have more restricted revenue for this program. We need y'all to appropriate our spending of that so we can keep hiring staff to scale this program. Is there anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I would just add to Travis's comments, I think that's right. In Oil, Gas, and Minerals Division, we have some staff that you gain some efficiencies, like our bonding specialists that can handle some aspects of this, but really this is new activity in our group, not to be put onto our other existing mine inspectors or oil and gas inspectors. So we think, you know, there's some synergies there, but really that's kind of the floor of what we see you would need, and really that's based on preliminary estimates of what might be coming in through the door on an annual basis to start with.
Okay, thank you. And then do you, because I was kind of thinking when I asked about the FTEs that would be processing things here, kind of on the back end, and you mentioned that plus actual inspectors. Is there already any type of inspection for these mines under current law?
Not at the state level, not in an umbrella mining statute sense. We do have inspectors at Eagle that do inspect for various other activities like air quality around dust control, crushing operations, discharge permits. So there is Eagle inspectors present at some of these mines depending on the scope of work that's going on there.
Did you want it? Representative Mueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just curious, what would the public input into this be, like in the permit process, if it were to go to you guys? Would you have open meetings? What would you do to ensure that the public felt like they were getting a voice in what was going on in their community?
Sure. Yeah. I'd say the way the bill is structured, it looks pretty similar to most of our permitting programs in terms of public comment, right? So once we've determined we have an administratively complete application, there's public notice, and that's usually local papers, online, on our calendar, and to appropriate email lists. And that announces a public comment period, which is usually 30 days. I think the bill has a provision that we can extend it for additional 30 days. And then the bill gives us an opportunity that if we determine that there's significant public interest, or if comments give us reason to, we may hold a public hearing. It's may. And then at the close of the public hearing and public comment period, we have a responsiveness document that we have to create to the comments that we received.
Thank you.
Representative Snyder.
Thank you. Vice Chair Mueller asked one of my questions, but thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Is there anything in these bills that doesn't enhance, environmental protection of aggregate mining, I guess?
I think that's a tough question to answer. I mean, there's it's handled locally right now, right? So we don't have a really deep insight there. I'll say personally, I do feel that the department's really well equipped to environmentally handle mining operations. But again, I think, I've heard in the past and in conversations in the legislature before, there's still some of those kind of local nuisance type issues that might not have a ton of space here.
Representative Nyer.
Thank you. Would all mining operations, gravel and sand, be required to get a permit from this point forward if it's implemented, or if the operation is able to make an agreement with the local units of government, could they still oversee that, or how do you see that happening?
So any, I'm going to look at Adam as I talk here, any mining operation with 1 million tons or more has to come into the state for a permit. If they are under 1 million tons, they could either go to the locals, or if they decided to come into the state, they could choose to do so. And then if you're under 5,000 tons or keeping all the material on site, not using it for commercial purposes, there's no permitting necessary there. It's de minimis is how it's defined in the bill.
So when you cross that 1 million mark, you will be required to go underneath states. Thank you.
Representative McFall.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for being here today. So I know that you said that you don't want to weigh in on local control stuff. The problem that I have is the part where in the bill where it says if a mining operation requires the use of a road other than a Class A road, the department may request that the operator collaborate with the county road commission to determine a route from the mining area to a Class A road. Isn't that you wading in to local control at that point?
Yeah, that's a fair point, Representative. And I think some of the comments that we submitted to the sponsor's office, listen, as we take we consider the possibility of taking over this program, I think it's inherently different from some of the mining that we already regulate. And so I feel like it's kind of incumbent upon me to help ensure that this program looks at a way that minimizes some of that conflict. So yeah, things like haul routes might be something where there needs to be local conversation. I acknowledge that.
The other question I have is that similar to other mining operations? Is that something that you guys do already?
I'm gonna look at my mining expert.
It is. Again, we don't want to be the regulator of road bonding and roadways and all those things. But on some of these issues, we find ourselves in other mining programs being sort of a mediator and trying to help facilitate those conversations to the extent you can come up with solutions. When Travis and I were sitting back there, that may, I said, will be a will, that we would do that, just I think as a good course of good government and trying to come up with the least impactful routes possible to communities. But you know, there may be instances that there's not a concern and it's a simpler solution and not controversial, that it's a may. But my first inclination was that that's probably going to be a will most of the time.
Okay.
For
Thank
that
you.
reason.
Yeah, thank you.
Sounds like a shall. Representative Filler.
It's a question I wanted to ask for a while, which is the difference between nickel mining and aggregate mining. I don't think this was asked before, but I assume you treat that differently. More conversations go into nickel mining due to the, I guess, very aggressive nature, environmental impact, but I don't know if you wanted to take that on in front of this committee.
Sure. Thank you, Representative. Our metallic mineral mining in the Upper Peninsula is a different kind of mining that involves blasting very large open pits, deep, sometimes underground. Non-ferrous metallic mineral mines, particularly if there's sulfide ore like the nickel mine is, that creates a whole set of chemical issues and risks that involve additional regulations to protect the environment from those kind of risks that don't exist. The Michigan Aggregates Association testified that they're not using chemicals for washing and those kind of things. So some of those issues are simpler, but the reclamation can be complex in both. So reclamation is how you put the land back when you're all done and you restore the land. In aggregate mining, you know, I've been on sites that have been done very well, and I've been on them that basically they stay as an exposed mineral soil and not much of use can grow on it. So in either mining scenarios, reclamation requirements are very important and that it be conducted properly.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation and being here. Next, we have a list of persons that wish to speak and oppose the bill. We will start with Judy Allen from the Michigan Township Association. There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I will first of all apologize for my voice. I haven't had my normal voice for at least a week, so please bear with me if it gets a little scratchy and is uncomfortable. Again, my name is Judy Allen. I'm Director of Government Relations for Michigan Townships Association. And first and foremost, I will say that we understand the need and support the access for materials that are necessary in this state for infrastructure, for our roads and building construction. However, we oppose House Bills 4526, 4527, and 4528, which represent a dynamic shift from local oversight to a total preemption of all local zoning, administration, and ordinances. Under the bills, a sand and gravel mine or a crushing facility or a storage facility can go anywhere. So there may not be the aggregate in the ground, but you could still have a crushing facility or a storage facility at a location where there's no mining taking place. And so they would go anywhere regardless of the zoning. I will state Sand and gravel mining occurs all over the state. You've heard the department talk about where some of the mining is limited that they currently permit. But this is all over the state, and each case is different, regardless of the impacts. The bills before you create a one-size-fits-all process, incorrectly treating all communities and all mining operations in the state alike. And it proposes that the state take over the matters that are intimately involved, matters of local concern. These bills will allow the sand and gravel mining to operate, again, the mining, the storage, the crushing facilities, without any engagement or local input from residents or locally elected officials, whether it's the township, the city, or the county level. Additionally, the bills propose to overturn years of local regulation in the majority of mining operations. However, there are a few situations that have created problems. And it creates a dual system. Some would be locally regulated, some would be regulated by EGLE. I will state the current statute is very restrictive when it comes to very serious consequences. This is not language that the local units of government ask for. This is language the industry wrote and drafted and had the legislature pass in 2011, following a Supreme Court decision that gave locals more authority. It was the Casson decision in 2010 that gave locals more authority over sand and gravel mining operations. And then the legislature codified in 2011 the Silva decision that had been operated under since, I want to say, in the 80s. I will say also that local units of government, I know there was a slide that was shown previously. I could not see it from where I was seated in the committee room, but I have seen this slide before. In asking the industry, how does one local unit get their name on that slide? You have an attorney involved. Simple as that. There are officials, elected officials in this room today that were shocked to see their township or their local unit's name on that slide. They don't have a problem. They are working well with the operators in their community. Some of those names are on there from 20 to 30 years ago. Some of those are where it never went to a planning commission because the state came in and asked to swap out the land with the township and the owner of the property. So it's a little, I would say the picture paints a different picture than what is actually the truth. Also, based on the language in 4527, in the proposed change under Section 1, the zoning authority would not be applicable to sand and gravel mining operations, period. Now keep in mind, 4528 talks about this, the language conflicts with 4528 because 4528 provides provisions that local authority would exist for pre-existing, it would exist for de minimis mining, and less than 1 million tons of deposit. So right there, these two bills conflict with each other. The legislation also creates an arbitrary exemption. There was a reference made to other mining that occurs that the state regulates. I think you heard that it was under 10. I'm not sure what the total number was, but it's under 10 permits. It does not include, specifically this bill excludes clay, limestone, or limestone products. So to say it brings it in line with other mining operations regulated by the state, it clearly does not, and there's a differentiation. In regard to reclamation, it's very complex. Again, that is what was pointed out in previous testimony. Every site is different. Based on some previous mining activities, and I believe there will be people, if they have the opportunity to testify today, can share that the range incorporated in the bill is not sufficient. They've had reclamation costs go way higher than that per acre. And so that leaves a hole in that community. There were slides with a reference to pictures that you could check. Keep in mind, every one of those reclamation slides that you're going to look at, there was a local reclamation plan in place. That was due to what the local unit of government may have required with those permits, not something that Eagle put in place. And will Eagle require the same? I just want to point out a few provisions in the bill. If you look at, at page 6, lines 14 through 27, in 4528, the local rules or ordinances that apply now are gone. This provision is more onerous than currently approved mining permits by the state. And again, Eagle just stated that, they have very specific things in place when it comes to sulfite, nickel, other mining operations. Even under those operations in statute, local units have the ability to deal with truck routes, hours of operation, and water monitoring. So again, very, very different and very selective. The other part I would just raise is there are provisions under section 63909 where an operator can request modifications to a permit. There's no part in here that allows a local unit or the residents to request a modification. Again, the financial assurance, it sets artificial limitations, and I just stress again that every site is different. When you look at noise levels, this is outlined on page 11, lines 3 through 13. They're suitable and established for my OSHA level that requires a worker's hearing to be protected. This isn't for residential. Michigan can do better than providing bare minimum protections to its residents. You will also note that the level is based on an 8-hour weighted average. It states 75 decibels for that period. So that means for 4 hours, it could be much, much higher than 75 decibels. Think of children in a backyard, or yourself in wanting to enjoy your own backyard or the comforts of your home. This allows industrial noise levels to be on neighboring properties at a much higher level. 90 decibels, it would be allowed in agricultural zones. And again, these are over the 8-hour weighted period. Blasting, again, this is in subsection O, II, allows air blasting up to 133 decibels. Subsection P allows the use of explosives in residential neighborhoods. There's also a section on vibration. I will not go through this section by section. I want to reference the truck routes. Right now, under the bill, it says that hours have to be at least beginning at 6 a.m. and going 13 hours a day, at least. There's provision that allows the state department or a county to expand those hours. Residents and locals have no authority to request any change. They have no authority to comment on those requests to the state, if the state has that. The truck routes would no longer be regulated by the local unit of government, and this would allow trucks to ignore any posted signs that might exist in that community. And while they do have to disclose their anticipated impact on pedestrians, they don't have to do anything else. So truck routes under the highway law that can be set by townships, we do have that authority, would no longer be optional. The collaboration would not be there. I think Representative Mathal, you got your own question when you ask about must they or do they have to work with the locals. No, the language says may. May. Doesn't say they have to. Other issues of concern is the placement of the mines in relationship to the roads, the residential housing that's outlined in the bill. Currently, those are all subject to local regulation. Mines under the bill can be 50 feet from a road. Equipment for screening and crushing can be 200 feet from the road or 300 feet from an adjoining property line. Again, mining areas cannot be less than 500 feet from a residential building occupied on adjacent property. When you talk about being occupied, there's a specific reference in there to occupied. So if I owned a home and it was adjoining property and I had that home up for sale, if there was an application for that mining permit at the time that house was for sale or unoccupied, that setback does not qualify.
Ms. Allen, in the essence of fairness, we've allowed aggregates 10, U10, and there may be some questions, so can you
Okay.
wrap it up for us?
I will
in
I will
case.
wrap it up very quickly, Mr. Chair, just to say that if a person's aggrieved because of a zoning position right now, they can, there's an ability to have a referendum. The citizens can bring it. And also, there's a provision in here that states that any existing pre-existing or judicial decision would no longer be relevant. So if you have had a situation where there's been a court challenge under these bills, that is null and void. It eliminates that process. So with that, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, we stand ready to look forward to compromise on legislation. We have been at the table for the past several years. However, we have been told in 3 different meetings that this is it. There is no willingness to compromise to bring in locals. And with that, Mr. Chair, I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Next, wishing to speak in opposition is Jen Richter, Inc.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Committee. I'm Jen Rigtrink with the Michigan Municipal League, and as you stated, here to speak in opposition to these bills. We very much appreciate the opportunity to talk. This is the 3rd session, legislative session that I have been involved in speaking on these bills. We are here with a new set of legislators, new year, same crap, point blank. We have been at the table a number of times trying to have discussions, actual meaningful discussions to solve problems. We're not saying that there's not an issue or some problems here that we can look at talking about and coming up with reasonable solutions to get at what the problems are. What you have in front of you, though, is a complete profit over people, and it's putting the industry front and center, written by the industry, for the industry, here for you. To reinforce a couple of the things you just heard from Judy Allen, I'm not going to repeat them all, but quality of life. Locals are charged. They're the government closest to the people. They're the ones charged with those local issues in making decisions, in listening to their residents. They are also guided by laws. We already have the Zoning Enabling Act. It's very restrictive on what locals can and can't say no to. Very serious consequences. We are very open to the discussion if that definition needs to be updated or amended. We are open to that discussion and tweaking that to get at that issue. One of the reasons we don't think that is actually the issue is because in 4527, there is language in there that says any past administrative or judicial decision is null and void going forward. So if this is about opening new minds, getting minds, why are we going back and looking at past court cases that have already been decided by one branch of government? Public comment is not equal to a public meeting. I was happy to hear the representatives for Eagle say that they will have public meetings, but that gentleman will someday retire. He will not be the staff person there overseeing this. So at a minimum, that is one thing that does need to be changed. That has to be a shale. There has to be local input from the people that are impacted by these operations. As it was stated, the mining definition is more than just your traditional sand and mining mine. It's crushing facilities, it's storage facilities. I think you all have a picture. This highlights when we talk about 70-foot piles. Just to give everybody a visual, this is our state Christmas tree from the last 2 years. This is 63 feet tall. So again, you could be living next to this. Maybe 200 feet, 300 feet off your property line, but still, that's going to be a pile next to your house. that required, I think it says, a 4-foot fence. So that, a pile that high, I don't know how you mitigate dust blowing off a 70-foot pile with a 4-foot fence. When it comes to noise, Judy illustrated it, but I'll tell you this, even if you don't weight it, 75 is your lawnmower, your neighbor's lawnmower, running for 8 hours, 6 days a week, starting by at least 6 a.m. That's what the bill says. Anytime it talks about in 4528 local input, it always refers back to section 63903. That is the preemption language. So while it talks about in the reclamation that you can consider a master plan, it also says as long as it is not in conflict with section 63903, which is the preemption language. In Michigan, cities and villages, this was what I was going to read, but there had to be some other things that were addressed before I got to this. Cities and villages, we're responsible for over 21,000 miles of road. We understand the cost associated with building these roads and the need to be efficient with public resources. Supporters of the legislation have said numerous times just today and previously in the media, it's needed. This is going to save taxpayer money by fighting inflation, cutting costs, and it's specifically been stated that the state could save as much as $700 million on the governor's $3.5 billion bonding program, and that we are wasting over $1 billion annually in transportation costs for road building materials. We need additional help understanding how there is $1 billion in annual waste. If we look at the transportation budget currently before the House right now, there's a total spending of $6.8 billion. About $500 million is one-time funding. 350 of that is debt payments. But we're looking around $4 billion in local roads and bridges funding. So are we saying of that $4 billion, there's $1 billion in waste, and that waste is from trucking aggregate? We need to know how we're calculating, how these savings are going to be calculated. Is that the total cost of a haul? Most of the costs we must pay. That cost is the same whether it's a short or long distance when it comes to local roads. How are we going to be passing on taxpayer saving in the cost of these projects if that cost is wrapped up in the actual trucking?
Ms. Rigner?
Yes.
We had you down, time needed, 3 minutes. We're at about 7 or 8, and there's a couple questions for you.
Okay.
So in an effort to be fair and try to get everybody an opportunity.
I'll wrap this up real quick.
Because we do have a hard stop, but I'm going to try to move it a little bit because we've got
I'd be
quite a
happy
few
to come
cards.
back too if we're going to have another committee on this.
They have a question from Representative Filler.
I am glad to hear you acknowledge that there is a problem. I have sat and seen, a community deny a permit, a great community actor doing all the right things on a Class A haul route, and one of the complaints was, there's going to be extra dust, and this is a road right by one mine and a massive landfill, which everyone is very clear that they live by the landfill and the mine, and there is going to be dust, and they know it, and it's a Class A, and so just to see some of those denials, so I do hope there's some movement towards working together, because I do acknowledge there is a big problem in Michigan, and I just have kind of seen the worst of the worst when it comes to denial of a really good actor following everything properly because of the mishmash of, you're just doing your best to find a township that you hope will work with you. And so thank you for your testimony.
Okay.
Thank you. Next, opposing and wishing to speak is Andrea Brown from the Michigan Association of Planning. Ms. Brown? And I'm trying not to cut anybody off, but I've got quite a few people wishing to speak.
Good morning. Chair, members of the committee, I'm Andrea Brown, the Executive Director of the Michigan chapter of the American Planning Association, also known as MAP. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. We represent about 4,000 local elected and appointed officials, as well as professional city planners and zoning administrators. I'm going to keep my comments very short. I have just 5 succinct statements to make about these bills. First, we need to take great care with preemption across the board. There are a number of different bills coming out of other committees as well that seek to preempt local government authority and decision-making, including those for short-term rentals and for alternative energy siting. So local government is getting hit left and right with undermining their local authority to make good plans, good zoning ordinances, and good local decisions. So that is my first statement. The second statement is that these aggregate bills are really industry-written bills, and even our friends at Eagle note that more conversations need to be had with these. And my overarching recommendation is that we need to put a pause on these and not move these quickly out of committee until more voices are able to provide input and create good bills. We all recognize that aggregate materials are necessary to build and maintain our roads in Michigan, but local government also needs to maintain some control over what is going on in their municipalities. We have planning enabling acts and zoning enabling acts that provide local government with the authority to make the plans and make the laws. Sometimes there are outliers, we all know that, but for the most part, local government is working really hard to create great places. And finally, again, you know, we turn over so fast, our House members. Back in the day, we used to hold stakeholder meetings on bills that were as important as this one. And I would urge you to consider some old school bringing together of the stakeholders to really hash out some of these issues. We have to have more conversations. This is an aggregate industry written bill. It's like the fox guarding the hen house, right? We need to be more careful, and we do need to have local government voices influencing these and other preemption bills that may or may not come before this committee. So I urge you to pause on these, to reflect, to allow for more input from other stakeholders in addition to the aggregate industry. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, wishing to speak in opposition of the bill is Megan Tinsley from Michigan Environmental Council.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chairs, and members of the committee. I'm Megan Tinsley, representing the Michigan Environmental Council, coalition of over 80 organizations dedicated to achieving positive change through policy solutions. And first, I will address why I'm the only member of the environmental community that will speak as part of this hearing today. It's not simply because we're running out of time. Several of our partners, as well as our executive director, are holding a press event as we speak, explaining our deep disappointment that this set of bills with profound environmental consequences are moving forward at both this rate of speed and without any meaningful input from the environmental community. We collectively opposed very similar bills last session. Simultaneously, the House has yet to advance measures to hold polluters accountable in any sense, or take action to fend off the worst impacts expected from climate change. However, so silence is not mistaken for approval, I am providing these comments today in addition to our submitted letter. As Water Policy Director, I will focus primarily here, for the sake of time, on water resources. So sort of this idea has been generated that just digging a hole and taking out the material has absolutely no impact on the land and our water resources. So by the mining activity itself, we strip away the sand, the gravel, and the clay deposits that actually provide filtration for the underlying aquifer. Once the layers are removed, that aquifer becomes vulnerable to contaminants. The mining itself can release harmful sediments, including salts, into the surface and groundwater. Nearby water supplies then become vulnerable to the contaminants that may have occurred during the mining activity or that could have been present previously from other activities such as industry or agriculture. And in some situations, mining activities near floodplains, rivers, or other bodies of water can alter the direction of water flow and have the potential to deplete wells. So from a water perspective, this is both a quality and quantity issue. And although we have both abundant water and aggregates in Michigan, we have chronically underinvested in mapping both. So without this knowledge or any strategic plan, we are not siting these operations with a consideration of the future. So the result is a proposed mine near a Superfund landfill site and existing mines that place the burden of unhealthy levels of noise and toxic silica dust on nearby communities. We can and we must do better. For example, while 4528 calls for not exacerbating any existing pollution, there is no water monitoring required to protect against this. We need a robust permitting process that looks at siting decisions cumulatively with regard to water resources and considers where mines are located within proximity to one another to adequately protect air quality for local communities. As Michigan is in the top 10 producing sand and gravel states in the nation, why are we moving forward with this as if we have no current supply? And as a state plagued by horrific examples of drinking water contamination, why are we not putting in place the best protections that we can? We're talking only about the cost related to trucking these materials and not what it costs to clean up drinking water if it's not adequately protected. As written, we feel this legislation fails to chart the best path forward. Thank you for the consideration of the comments.
Thank you. So, and any members have to leave, I'm going to stay and try to get everybody in. I know that there's 5 from Metamora, but there's also a slide presentation. Will the person responsible for that come up? Good morning. And please introduce yourselves because I have 5 cards here and I just want to make sure.
My name is Michelle Joliet, and as you said, I'm from Metamora. I want to tell you what will happen to my community and my neighborhood if this legislation passes. I want to show you a map of where my house is in relation to where the Metamora EPA Superfund site is, and in relation to the Boy Scout camp, where the Edward C. Levy Company wants to mine 600 acres. I'm sorry, can you just present it like this? Can you close the comments? So as we're getting set up here, my house is in between. I live 500 yards from a leaking EPA Superfund site. This Superfund site is leaking 1,4-dioxane and PFAS into all 3 of our aquifers. My residential well and some of my neighbors are contaminated. I can't drink the water in my house. For the past 3 years, I get water trucked to my house to cook and to drink with, and then we haul water up to our bathrooms. Now, okay, so that's my house with the red dot. Here's the proposed gravel mine. This is the Boy Scout camp where the Levy Company wants to mine 600 acres. And let me say that again. The Levy Company wants to mine 1,000 yards away from a leaking EPA Superfund site. Who thinks this is a good idea? The aquifers on that site are also contaminated. The EPA has 61 monitoring wells in my community. They monitor the contamination, the flow, the volume, and the direction. The only reason this proposed mine is not there is because of our township support and local control. And by passing this legislation, you are taking away the right of local control, not only from my township, but from every township across the state of Michigan. This legislation will destroy my community, and God knows how many more wells will be contaminated. An industrial-sized mine will disrupt the water tables. And by the way, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think under this bill, the mining permit, you don't have to submit a water sample to get approved. How ludicrous is that? This scenario will be played out all over the state, as aggregate companies will no longer have any local oversight over their practices. They will be able to mine anywhere, even in environmentally sensitive areas, such as next to a leaking Superfund site. This legislation silences us. It takes away our voice. I'm asking you to do the right thing to protect our state's citizens, our voice, and our water, and vote these bills down.
Thank you, Michelle. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Christopher Bizdock. I represent Metamora Preservation and have done so since 2008. We've been engaged in a very long fight with the Edward Levy Company and American Aggregates, who has sued the community many, many times and has lost each time, and that's a big part of why we're here today. I want to start by rewinding to the genesis of these bills, which is a sham study. It was done by MDOT, but it was steered and directed by the Michigan Aggregates Association, and these are links to 4 articles from the Detroit Free Press about how the association tried to use a sham study to push these bills through in a prior session. Gravel lobbyists steered MDOT report on gravel shortage. Officials said lobbyists who steered $50,000 gravel study should refund the state for its costs. An audit, the Michigan taxpayers were ripped off with a questionable $100,000 MDOT gravel study on need. And a senator on the oversight committee, MDOT's handling of the gravel study was outright fraud. I would urge you to read up on how this all started and how it was attempted to be launched through a process by those who are here today. A lot of these bills are bad policy. Some of these issues have been talked about already. One that is not is that they've actually stripped need out of the bills. So the whole pretext for these bills is there's this dire need for gravel, but if you look at the zoning bill, the part about demonstrating a need for the resource is gone. There are some stats here. Again, I'd urge you to read up on the stats. There are many sites in Michigan. There are many sites registered with MDOT. 95% of the permits get approved. This is not about fixing the damn roads. The state permitting bill, I'm going to run through these very quickly because I appreciate your patience, and I know it's been a long hearing already. Preemption has already been discussed. Mines being site anywhere has already been discussed. No other Great Lakes state does this. Michigan would be an outlier. 50 feet from neighboring property lines, rock crushing, 300 feet from homes. All the chapter and verse is there. The trucks we already heard about, 13 hours a day, 11 hours a day on Saturday, and that's a minimum, not a maximum. No groundwater testing or monitoring. Don't believe us. That's in the Eagle comments. See the Eagle comments on 16.905. This does not consider water pollution at Michelle's house. It does not consider impacts, upgrade or downgrade from the mining site. The language in the bill is very specific that it only addresses at all groundwater contamination on the mine site, not the neighbors, not the areas in proximity. Industrial noise we already heard. Eagle said this will result in unenforceable noise. That's their comment. Air blasting we heard about. Explosive in residential neighborhoods we heard about. Part 4 is my last part. This bill punishes neighbors financially with financial penalties if they complain more than once to Eagle. Eagle says there is no comparable provision in any other statute it administers. This is meant to deter people, to prevent people from voicing any local concern they have. Right now, you call your local township. The zoning administrator goes out, checks, is the permit in compliance, is it not in compliance? If you do that once, you're okay. If you do it a second time, you get fined under this industry-written bill. That's a free speech problem. It's a petition for your government for redress of grievances problem. Eagle calls it legally problematic. And we already heard it wipes out or vacates all prior court decisions against a mining project. That provision's about Metamora, because they've been suing Metamora since the 1980s, and they've lost every case, and they want to wipe all of that out. That is specifically targeted at Metamora. This is a statewide issue, but there's a very specific vendetta at play here by one company, one operator. We also have setting the record straight on a number of other facts about what Eagle permits. You heard some of that, about the prior versions of this legislation, and about the harassment that has gone on in that community for decades. I will leave you to review that at your leisure, and there's more information available at this website. I thank you for your time today.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Scott Benscotter, Treasurer, Metamora.
Mr. Chair, my name is Gerald Fisher. I'm with Mr. Benscotter. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to speak today. My name is Scott Benscotter. I hold the office of Treasurer, Metamora Township. Prior to this office, I worked for General Motors for 35 years. Frankly, I'm new to township government and was appointed in 19, and I was reelected in 2020. So I don't have 20-plus years of background experience in gravel mining legislation, supporting or fighting it. However, I hope to represent the residents of Metamora Township with a brief testimony today. State law requires local governments to approve an aggregate mining permit unless they can prove very serious consequences would occur as a result of that mine. We believe the law today is working. In fact, according to a survey done in 2020 by the Michigan Township Association, 96% of all aggregate mine permits received permits were approved over the past 5 years. Regardless, we are here today to discuss possible changes to the law on aggregate mining. Metamora Township is not opposed to mining. In fact, we have 4 township active mines right now. As you are aware, we have been in constant litigation over a quarter century about the potential of a mine next to a Superfund site, which we've talked about many times, which is leaching dioxane 1,4 into all levels of the aquifer in our township. We have not instigated any of the lawsuits, but state, local, and federal courts have sided with the township. Simply put, there are some places where it's not appropriate to build a gravel mine, as it would risk the public health and safety and cause harm to the environment. In this case, most recently, EPA monitoring wells, which have been mentioned already, continue to show trends that indicate that the deadly plume on the property in question pose a threat to water going into the Flint River and the entire Flint River watershed. This isn't to say we oppose a reasonable change to the legislation, but those changes need to make sense. Obviously, we oppose the law as it's currently written because it wipes out local control, resulting in no one having authority over sitting or land use. Under the introduced bill, a gravel pit could be wedged between existing subdivisions and a residential neighborhood, while residents find themselves exposed to excessive explosion, mining levels, noise levels on the property over OSHA requirements, and obviously hauling and loading trucks 13 to 14 or 12 to 13 hours a day, 6 days a week at a minimum. As stated many times before, we are not opposed to trying to make some changes to the current law, including requiring timelines, response, clarifying permit renewals, and in the process. We are, however, opposed to poisoning our water and the water of our neighbors. This bill, as written, does that, and we cannot support it. I'm happy to take any questions, unless you want to.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, my name is Gerald Fisher, and I'm an attorney for Metamora in Lapeer County. Also, I'm representing today Casson Township in Leelanau County that has been mentioned, and Sharon Township in Washtenaw County. I'm also a former township supervisor myself, and have had considerable. I've represented local governments and been involved in this area of gravel mining for more than 40 years. So I've seen a lot of this situation. I know that there are some communities that don't do everything right. We've heard about some of those today as referred to outliers. But there are also applicants that come forward and don't do the right thing. And they don't present honestly and straightforwardly. And that's one of the reasons why some time periods go by and complained of, and I'm not referring to anybody that was here today, but the real critical thing that I see in all the experience that I've had is, and the shortcoming that has not been addressed here, and Mr. Chair, with all due respect, when you introduced this bill, when Mr. Needham came up here and spoke, there were a lot of reasons given for why this bill should go through. One of the most important reasons that was not mentioned was representing the people of the state and taking care of their quality of life. That's why local governments exist, I think, for the most part. And I know that Mr. Chair, you're acting in good faith. There's no question in my mind. And that just wasn't one of the things that you'd mentioned. I'm sure it's in your mind, but it's got to be in the forefront of everybody's mind here, is taking care of the quality of life of people in these communities. In Casson Township, for example, we know that there's a Superfund site in Metamora that needs to be addressed. Casson Township, operating under the current Act 113 standards, ended up with like 9 gravel pits in one township. So what did they do? In good faith, they created a 5-mile by 5-mile area, master planned, for gravel. 5 mile by 5 mile, so that people weren't surprised whenever they open the newspapers in the morning and yeah, there's a new site going next to us. They created the place where there is gravel, and it would work out. This bill would kill all that. They've made such an effort to do this. This bill would kill that, and people could just come in again and increase the number of mines elsewhere. Sharon Township, interestingly enough, on the list that Mr. Needham showed, Sharon Township appeared twice. So they are deniers twice. But the truth is, they've never denied anything. And they have gravel pits in their community, and they've got one pending right now. So that list is bogus in many respects. I've been involved in this for all this time. I have found very little unmet need. When it finally comes down, when the hearings occur, and everybody's got to put their cards on the table, there's very little unmet need. But there is a need to represent property owners and citizens that are hugely impacted in this situation, in their daily lives. What is there that's going to protect people's homes? Not in this bill. That's not a criteria. So if people come in and say, we want to tell you what's wrong with this process and this proposal, well, that's not in section so-and-so. That's not in this bill, so we can't take that into consideration. That's got to be something taken into consideration. What about pedestrians and disabled persons that want to walk on an area that may be designated as a haul route by the industry in one of these things? No, that's not on the list. That's not on the list. Disabled persons and pedestrians don't count. School children with bus stops and so forth, and things like that, that's not on the list. But what is on the list for here is private citizens, or represented by local governments, private citizens themselves are being deprived after 2 centuries of nuisance law. Or a private citizen can try to protect themselves from a nuisance occurring that is impacting their property. This bill expressly prohibits people from bringing a private nuisance law action. That's unbelievable. I mean, that's, if I could use the word, that's draconian. That's draconian. And so local governments represent people in zoning and the community. I'm going to finish up now. Represent people in community in their zoning, land use, economic development. And you can't possibly think that a large, heavy industrial use in one area that goes in is not going to impact things that are around it. You know, we can say that there are going to be truck traffic over for a certain period of hours, but that doesn't tell you the truth, the full picture. The picture is, like in Sharon Township, right now there's a proposal for a 400-acre mine. Fine, it's not on a numbered road. You've got to go along to get it. When they're busy, every 3 minutes there'll be a truck there. That puts it into everyday understanding. There'll be every 3 minutes there'll be a truck that goes by. How is that for a school stop, pedestrians, bike riders, and so forth? So, and you know, I'm not minimizing anything else that's been said about protecting the environment and all that. All that's important, but I think we have to protect human beings that are impacted by this and would be impacted every day for 20, 25 years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate your passion. We have about 4 or 5 people wishing to speak, and it's 12:20. If you all can decide, or if you want to split up 2 minutes apiece, as you see, this is really important. And what has taken place, I think somebody brought it up, this has been a decades-old issue, and we've had huge turnover here in the legislature. So we've got almost half new legislators. This is an important issue. I want everybody who has a concern to have their voice so that we can sit down and figure out, you know, how do we make this work? Because if it keeps coming up every session, every year, it doesn't serve anybody well. So with that, I'll say who I have left wishing to speak. If you wish to speak, Mr. Richardson, you wish to speak? Okay, I'll give you 2 minutes. Mr. David, can you read that? Rigas Township. You want your 2 minutes? Okay. Anthony Reeder. 2 minutes? All right. And Mr. DePalma tried to be slick and give me Robert DePalma and then Bob DePalma. So you're not getting any extra time. We're going to give you, we'll give you 2 as well. So with that, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time and mindful, so proceed, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you sticking around late. Thank you very much. I had a 5-minute version and a 3-minute version ready, but I'll see what I can do to get it down to 2 minutes. So I am Bill Richardson. I live in Waterloo Township. I was surprised to see Waterloo on the list as well because we've been working with 2 gravel pits for over 2 decades, so I don't know what that's about. I've served as Waterloo Township Extraction Committee Chair for the past 15 years. I'm one of the co-authors of its ordinance, and we have 2 extractive operations in Waterloo for the past 21 years. The Extraction Committee consists of a chair, 2 township board members, 1 planning commission member, 2 township residents, the township attorney, and township engineer. Our committee performs annual permit renewals for extractive operations. We find the annual renewal helpful and necessary to keep up with the progress at the plant and allows for corrections if necessary before things can't be undone. It also helps the operator save money by reducing the amount of reclamation bond as they perform phased reclamation on the site. The process has been working very well in our township for 2 decades. The township recognizes the right of the operation to mine a critical resource that is necessary for all residents of Michigan, and in mining operations recognize the township's residents' rights of health, safety, and welfare while the mining facility is in operation. I believe local control should be maintained because the local unit of the government is the closest to the operation, understands the impact on its citizens, and can monitor in real time how the operations are progressing against the operation's goals. I want to give a couple examples from Waterloo Township that focus this local control concept. If loose gravel is observed on the road exiting Aggregate Resources pit, which happens to be on a curve, this can cause a safety issue. We can contact the local operation and they take care of it with a sweeper they have on site, fixing the safety issue. Another critical one, somebody mentioned school bus route just a minute ago. Our township had concerns a few years ago from citizens whose children were getting on a bus at 6:40 a.m., saw a loaded gravel truck having to lock up its brakes to keep from hitting the school bus. This happened more than once. As a result, the township updated its ordinance and moved the hours of operation from 6:30 to 7 o'clock to avoid this potential safety issue with the morning school bus schedule. This particular example is a major problem with 4528 as it requires mines to be open at 6 a.m. in the morning, and this one right here will put Waterloo children's lives at risk because of the previous example that I just provided. I bring these up because they are good examples of the need to have local authority over these types of projects. Local municipalities are the closest to the operation. They are more familiar with the residents in the area and what concerns they might have, and they are much quicker to respond than a state agency would be. So those are my reasons for opposition of 4528. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Riga Township, David. Okay. Might have been the handwriting.
Sorry about that. Good to see you again, sir. So I'm one of the locals you've been hearing about today. I serve 1,300 people in my township, southeastern Lenawee County. I'm within 5 miles of 2 active mining operations. I live on a Class A road, gravel haulers going up and down all the time. I'm good with it. I have no problems with that. These are good companies, good neighbors. This is a local control problem for me. It's a local issue. And you've heard all about that today, and I think perhaps the attorney here put it best. This is about people, and this is government overreach, big time, in my opinion. And this is just based on where I live. Like, I don't live where you guys live. I live where I live, and the people that I represent are mostly farmers, some of the most productive ground in the state, and they want to keep it that way. But we do have mining operations around, Sylvania Minerals in Ohio and Stone Co. in Ottawa Lake. This is not a problem for us. So I just wanted to mention to you, I appreciate you, I respect you, you're doing a good job, appreciate you sticking around. But I oppose this just for the reasons I've stated. Thank you.
Anthony Reeder.
There we go. Good afternoon, members of the committee. I am the supervisor of Lennox Township, a small municipality of 12,000 people in northern Macomb County. Today you are considering a series of bills aimed to strip authority away from local governments and hand it over to unelected bureaucrats in the state government. Local governments are accountable to the people that they serve, but just like everyone on this committee. But who elects bureaucrats? These bills today, before you today, strip municipalities of their zoning authority, which the United States Supreme Court held in the village of Euclid versus Amber Realty Co. in 1926, that if they are not arbitrary or unreasonable, zoning ordinances are constitutional under the police power of local governments as long as they have some relation to public health, safety, morals, or general welfare. Sand and gravel mining is important to the state. We all can acknowledge that. But since when does the need for such materials outweigh public health, the safety of the public, and their general welfare? Lennox Township is host to one of these sites, a sand mining operation that has been operating in the township since its approval in November in the year 2000. In the beginning, relationships were rocky between the township and the operators, with many residents issuing complaints about their operation. With the township zoning authority, we were able to work out these complaints with the residents to where it was satisfactory with the sand mines operators under a special land use agreement with the township. Every year, for 2 decades now, they have come before the township board for their annual renewal, and it has been approved unanimously every time. You're most likely asking why I'm sharing such a positive story with you today is to show and prove to you that a one-size-fits-all policy is not and will not work the same for every community. And in these proposed bills before you today, these will allow a sand and gravel mine crushing facility or storage facility to operate anywhere within a community, regardless of zoning, undermining the ability of local officials to balance the needs of all property owners and the borders of their jurisdiction. Under this 3-bill package, no local regulations could apply to the operation in issues that are inherently local in nature, including hours of operation, truck routes, noise, dust control, and fencing. We have 4 schools within a 2-mile radius of our current sand mine. In our current climate today, if they decided to blasting, which we prohibit under our special land use, what would that have effect on students?
Thirty seconds.
It is said that local governments are the closest to the people that they are elected to serve. These bills will ultimately take the power away from the people that we all serve. I urge you today to stand with local governments and stand with the people and protect their rights and strike down these proposed bills before you today. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. De Palma.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be brief.
Thank you.
Okay. I've been the supervisor in Groveland Township in North Oakland County for 27 years, and 16 years prior to that, chairman of the Planning Commission. So for 43 years, I have personally approved every single mining pit for gravel operations in my township, and I think I have more than anybody in Oakland County. I currently have 4 operating pits, 2 that are completed, 1 that's never started, not because of anything by the township, and 2 that are adjacent to my community directly on the township borderlines. For me, this feels like a solution in search of some problem we don't seem to have, because most of these permits, I think, go through. And in my case, when I saw my name on the list for one of the pits that was involved in litigation, it was news to me, because I have to approve them before that happens, and we've never done one. The other 2 issues I want to mention briefly are, you talk about the reclamation cost. I think it's very hard to put a flat dollar on it, like $8,000. I have a mining operator, Levy, by the way, who bought the other half of a pit out from another operator, and part of the bank had to be redone on it. He told me the estimated cost to redo the bank on that part of the pit was going to be $1 million, and it's nowhere near $8,000. We actually have engineers that go out to the sites every year and evaluate what the cost would be for those various sites. And finally, when you talk about water draw, I know everybody has settling ponds. I don't think they're any problem. It's probably some of the cleanest water in the world after it goes through all the silt and so forth. But we also have miners that operate by drawing down the water table. And the one pit that we had a problem with was drawing the water table and the aquifer down about 70 feet so that he could dry mine it. That caused a number of wells and ponds in the area to go dry, and the reason it got stopped was because there was no coordination between our permit, and it was either a county or a DEQ permit for the water withdrawal rate. So I think there are some other issues that are practical, hard cases that you see happen, and I've dealt with probably all of them. So I don't think I can add anything more to whatever everybody else has already said, so thank you for today.
No, thank you. And so we have several cards that will be in the minutes that are in support of and that oppose, and people not wanting to speak. So I want to thank you all for coming today. I found it important that we have this conversation, not just with my colleagues about these bills, because it's many of us who are new to this situation, but as legislators, it's our obligation for outcomes. So I think that there is some work to be done that needs to be done, and I'm looking forward to us working on this, and I appreciate everybody coming out today. Appreciate your passion. Thank you. I'm going to adjourn. Trust me. We are adjourned.